Okay, now we have the opportunity to derive, to understand the AS relation. I draw the relation here, prices and real GDP, and increasing relation, yes, and the expression is prices times T equal to 1 plus the markup, which multiplies real wage, which is a function of union power and employment rate, which multiplies prices at time T minus 1. But the unemployment rate is equal to, we have an hypothesis on the unemployment rate, so we can write this expression as Z1 minus Y over L is our GDP. Our unemployment rate is defined in this way. Given this expression, the AS, the point is that there exists a level of Y which we can call Yn, so a level of GDP Pt minus 1 here, and which implies that Pt are equal to Pt minus 1, which implies that if prices are equal to the price at time t are equal to the price in the previous period, prices that will not change will be in equilibrium. This is the natural GDP. Natural GDP is the definition of GDP, which implies no movement in price. So if y is equal to this level yn, so the natural level, prices are fixed. So we can identify here the level yn, and in this will imply that pt is equal to pt minus 1. So prices are fixed. The expectation price are we have a realization of the expectation in some sense. Okay. This implies that if y is equal to yn, in the labor market, the GDP equal to the natural unemployment rate will generate an unemployment rate which is the natural unemployment rate. We imply that the unemployment rate is equal to the natural unemployment rate. So the actual unemployment rate is in equilibrium if the GDP is in equilibrium. The opposite, if the GDP is greater than the unemployment rate, that natural level, this will imply that the actual unemployment rate is lower than the natural unemployment rate, because if the GDP is greater, the unemployment is lower. But in this case, if the unemployment rate is lower than the equilibrium, this implies that prices at time t are higher than prices at time t minus 1. So prices increase. And this is what we can see from this equation. Because in this case, the impact of the real wage multiplied by 1 plus the markup is greater than 1. At the same time, if the actual GDP is lower than the national GDP, this implies that the actual unemployment rate is greater than the national unemployment rate, and this increases the price decrease. So prices at time t are lower than price at t minus 1. This is the logic behind our model. So in this, we can see that in this picture, if the GDP y is a level y prime higher than the natural level, this implies that um, prices increase, and if prices increase, we have a change in the expectation of union, so a shift will imply a shift upward of the AS relation, because there is an increase in price expectation. The opposite, if the GDP is lower, in this case, you have a decrease in the expectation of price. It's not so easy to understand, but now we need to put together the AD and the AS relation. The AD and the AS relation, we remember the AD relation is GDP equal to fiscal multiplier with delta 0, which multiply A, plus monetary multiplier, which multiplies real money stock. The AS as an equation prices at time t equal to 1 plus the markup, which multiplies wage, which is a function of the union power, and the unemployment rate, which is equal to 1 minus GDP over L, which multiplies the expectation on prices, which are equal to prices in the previous period. So we can start, we can consider simultaneously the equilibrium in GDP, the equilibrium in goods and services and monetary market and in the labor market, because they are, if we have equilibrium in GDP, we have also equilibrium in labor market. Here we have price and income, the AS relation, and the AD relation. We start with an equilibrium initial condition in which the AD and AS are equal for a given level of the GDP, and we pause to start in this case from the natural level, because this is an equilibrium. The natural level implies that prices at time t are equal to prices time t minus 1. In the labor market, what we observe is that what we can observe in the labor market, where we have the unemployment rate, the real wage, which is a function of Z and U, and the real wage that firms are willing to pay, or if the GDP is an equilibrium is equal to national unemployment, as to national GDP, unemployment will be equal to the national unemployment rate. So we are in equilibrium in we have an equilibrium GDP and equilibrium unemployment rate. Now we something may change. We start considering a demand shock, which is a shift on the AD relation. We can have a positive demand shock. We can start with a positive demand shock, so an increase in A, for instance, an expansion of fiscal policy, or also an expansion in monetary policy, so a shift to the right of the AD relation to a level AD prime. This implies that we have, for each level of price, a new level of GDP, a new level of GDP in equilibrium in the short run. Because in the short run, prices are fixed, so we can consider that the GDP will reach a new level Y prime. But this new level of Y prime is in the short run. We know in the ASLM, if we have, for instance, this is an example of increasing in A or increasing in MS, okay, in money stock. So in each one of these positive demand shock, in the short run we have an increase in GDP, as we have seen uh, in the ASLN model. The point is the effect in the medium run. In the medium run, prices, due to the fact that the GDP is higher than the natural GDP, we know that this implies that prices increase. If prices increase, prices start to increase. If prices increase, we move on the AD on the new AD relation, and the GDP starts to decrease because the GDP starts to decrease because this is equivalent to a restrictive monetary policy. We have also to specify that in the short run the GDP increases. This implies that the actual unemployment rate will decrease below the natural level. Sorry, I put an annotation. Okay, what I'm trying to explain is that if the GDP increases above the natural level, at the same time the unemployment rate reduces at level which is lower than the natural level, implying that which worker are able to ask union worker is higher than the real wage that firms want to pay. This is the initial situation. In this situation, we see that prices start to increase, and given the increase in price, the GDP starts to decrease because of the equivalent, because it's equivalent to a restrictive monetary policy. And if the GDP starts to decrease, also the unemployment rate starts to increase towards the natural level. The point is that if prices increases, also the expectation in each time or relative to the prices in next period start to increase. So we have a shift of the relation, AS relation, upwards and upward until a new equilibrium, and after n period, as n stands for n period, in which we have again the equilibrium, because again prices at time t are equal to prices at time t minus 1, and the GDP is again equal to the natural level, and the unemployment rate is equal to the unemployment in the natural level. So in equilibrium, we are again in equilibrium. After, in the medium run, what we can see is that we have again a GDP equal to the natural level, but with higher price. The unemployment rate again equal to the natural unemployment rate, which does not depend on aggregate demand, depends on the economic structure. It's important to make a difference between fiscal and monetary policy, because monetary policy is natural in the medium run. Fiscal policy is not natural, because if we implement an expansionary fiscal policy, for instance, increasing government expenditure, implies that when we have again the national GDP, the composition of this GDP have changed, because now we have more government expenditure, less investment, and net exports. So in this sense, may be that fiscal policy is not neutral, but if this government expenditure is productive government expenditure is public investment and so on. In this case, the effect on the medium run may be positive. Okay, now we can see an example of negative demand shock. Negative demand shock in this case, AS, AD. In this case, we start again with the natural level of GDP, so we are in equilibrium, prices are fixed, and we have a realization of expectation. A negative demand shock, so a restrictive monetary or fiscal policy, or reduction in the other components of aggregate demand, exogenous components, leads to a shift to the left. The shift to the left in short run implies that given the fact that prices are fixed, we have a reduction in actual GDP, as we have a restrictive monetary policy, some demand shock. But in the medium run, we have that prices start to decrease. But if prices start to decrease, also the expectation start to decrease, and so the AS shift below until again the GDP until a period is equal to the natural level, but with a lower level of price in the medium run. It is the effect of a negative demand shock. On the labor market, initially we are in equilibrium. In the labor market, the unemployment rate equal to the natural level. But given to the fact that we have a negative demand shock and the GDP in the short run goes below the natural level, also the unemployment rate increase and overcome the natural level. This is in the short run. This implies that the wage, real wage, is that unions are able to bargain is lower than the one that firms are willing to pay. Then we have a decrease in prices, and the decrease in prices implies a reduction in GDP and an increase in GDP and a reduction in the medium run, a reduction of the unemployment rate towards the natural level. The point is that this example offers the possibility to expand the logic underlying the policy, the policy implemented by government and central bank, because in this case, in case of negative demand shock, in the medium run we will reach again the new level of natural employment rate, but this may require 5-7 years. It depends. But if after the negative demand shock, in this case, we can accelerate through an expansion in fiscal or monetary policy the process of convergence toward the natural employment rate, natural level of unemployment and GDP, without waiting this time. But the same applies also to the case of positive demand shock, which leads to inflation. Central bank can counterbalance this effect by restrictive monetary policy, reducing the inflation rate, which is the aim of the central bank. Okay, now we can see the case of supply shock. For instance, a negative supply shock is an oil shock, which increases the prices of oil. Oil is an input of every production in the economic system, so this can be interpreted as an increase in the markup mi. In this case, we have seen that what given the initial equilibrium, okay, given the initial equilibrium, we have a reduction in the natural level of GDP and an increase because in this case the increase in mi implies we know a reduction of the labor market of the real wage that firms want to pay. This implies an increase in the natural unemployment rate to a level UN prime and a decrease in the natural GDP. What we can see is that the AS shift until a new equilibrium after an period in which prices will be higher respect to the initial case, and the GDP will start to decrease in the medium run, and we have an effect of stagflation, so recession and inflation. The opposite holds in case of positive supply shock. For instance, technical innovation, or also a reduction, what we are seeing in these days, the reduction in oil price. This can be interpreted a reduction in mi. A reduction in mi implies two effects. We start with now from this market, the labor market. A decrease in mi implies a reduction in natural unemployment rate in equilibrium, and the ASD model, our initial equilibrium is this. The reduction in markup implies an increase in the natural level of GDP, implying that if we have this increase, the AS start because we have a reduction on the expectation of price due to the decreasing markup till end period, we will reach a new equilibrium with lower price and higher GDP in equilibrium in the medium run. In the previous case, the negative supply shock implies that given the increase in the markup, the expectation will increase. We are not able to fight negative supply shock through demand shock, because if we have a negative demand shock and we try to counterbalance through positive demand shock, we will produce on inflation. We need a positive supply shock.